This footage comes from the night the Notorious B.I.G. was killed in Los Angeles, a night that has haunted the music industry for nearly 3 decades. Biggie's death remains one of hip-hop's deepest scars. What makes it even more painful is the lack of closure. To this day, no one has been convicted. No definitive answers, just a cold case surrounded by theories, missing pieces, and unanswered questions. But now, newly surfaced surveillance-related footage is once again putting a spotlight on what really happened that night, and raising the possibility that the truth may have been hiding in plain sight all along. Let's break down the night that changed everything. On March 9, 1997, just before 12:45 a.m., the course of hip-hop history was permanently altered. A green GMC Suburban rolled to a stop at a red light at the intersection of Wilshire Boulevard and South Fairfax Avenue in Los Angeles. Inside that vehicle was Christopher Wallace, known worldwide as Biggie Smalls, a 24-year-old lyrical powerhouse at the peak of his career. He was just weeks away from releasing his highly anticipated second album, Life After Death, a project that would soon become legendary for reasons no one could have predicted. What happened next would go down as one of the most infamous unsolved murders in music history. As Biggie's SUV sat at the light, a dark-colored Chevy Impala SS pulled up alongside it. Witnesses later described the driver as a black male wearing a light blue suit and a bow tie, a detail so unusual that it stuck with people for years. Without warning, the shooter raised a handgun and fired 6 shots into the vehicle. 4 of those bullets struck Biggie. The fatal shot entered through his right hip, causing catastrophic internal damage. He was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but despite emergency efforts, Christopher Wallace was pronounced dead at 1:15 a.m. Nearly 3 decades later, nobody has been held accountable. The murder happened during a critical moment in hip-hop. Biggie had just arrived in Los Angeles to promote his upcoming album and attend the Soul Train Music Awards on March 7th. The following night, March 8th, after spending time at the Westwood Marquis Hotel, he and his crew decided to attend an after-party at the Peterson Automotive Museum. The event was co-hosted by Vibe magazine and legendary producer Quincy Jones, bringing together major figures from across the music industry. It was a packed, high-profile gathering, the kind of place where artists, executives, and influential figures all collided in one room. But by around 12:30 a.m., the party was shut down due to overcrowding. Hundreds of people poured out into the streets, creating a chaotic, crowded environment filled with traffic, noise, and confusion. In hindsight, that chaos may have provided the perfect cover for what was about to happen. Biggie left the scene as part of a 3-vehicle convoy. He was seated in the front passenger seat of the green GMC Suburban, driven by his close associate Gregory G. Money Young. 2 other individuals sat in the back. Meanwhile, Sean Combs, Biggie's longtime friend and the head of Bad Boy Records, was riding in a separate SUV ahead of Biggie's vehicle. That separation would later prove crucial, as it meant Diddy did not witness the shooting firsthand. The attack came just hours after what should have been a triumphant appearance in Los Angeles. The timing was especially tragic, coming only 6 months after the murder of Tupac Shakur in Las Vegas. Because of that, both deaths quickly became linked in the public eye, tied to the infamous East Coast versus West Coast rivalry that dominated the 1990s. But one of the most overlooked aspects of Biggie's case is how compromised the investigation was from the very beginning, largely due to the lack of usable surveillance footage. In 1997, public surveillance systems were nothing like they are today. Cameras existed, but they were limited, low quality, and not widely distributed. The intersection where the shooting occurred was busy, but there were no operational cameras capturing the incident clearly. That meant no clear image of the shooter, no readable license plate, and no reliable visual timeline of events. Even more surprising, the Peterson Automotive Museum, where hundreds of high-profile guests had gathered, failed to provide any meaningful surveillance footage. While cameras reportedly existed inside, there is no evidence that they captured anything useful related to the suspect or activity outside the venue. This represents a major missed opportunity. Proper exterior surveillance might have captured the Impala circling the block or the shooter positioning himself before the attack. There is, however, mention of a handheld recording taken around the time of the shooting. The footage allegedly shows bright headlights speeding away immediately after the gunfire, followed by another slower-moving vehicle. While this suggests a coordinated escape, the video quality was far too poor to identify license plates, faces, or specific vehicle details beyond a general description of a dark-colored Impala. As a result, investigators were forced to rely heavily on eyewitness accounts, one of the least reliable forms of evidence, especially in chaotic and traumatic situations. Witnesses gave conflicting statements, and many were reluctant to cooperate, likely out of fear of retaliation. There were also reports of suspicious behavior inside the museum. Multiple witnesses mentioned a woman who appeared to be asking which vehicle Biggie would be leaving in, raising the possibility of a spotter involved in the setup. If proper surveillance footage from inside the venue had been preserved and analyzed, it might have identified this individual or uncovered additional suspects. But whether due to poor camera placement, lost footage, or investigative failure, that opportunity was lost. All of this unfolded against the backdrop of one of hip-hop's most dangerous eras. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry had evolved beyond music into something far more serious, fueled by personal tensions, business conflicts, and street affiliations. Suge Knight, the controversial co-founder of Death Row Records, was a central figure on the West Coast side and a known rival to Diddy and Bad Boy. Though Knight was incarcerated at the time of Biggie's murder, some investigators have suggested he may have orchestrated the hit from behind bars as retaliation for Tupac's death, a claim he has consistently denied. The situation was further complicated by gang affiliations tied to both sides. Death Row had connections to the mob Piru Bloods, while some Bad Boy associates were rumored to have links to Crip sets. These connections blurred the line between music industry disputes and real-world violence. Adding another layer of controversy, former LAPD detective Russell Poole claimed that corrupt police officers with ties to death row and gang networks may have been involved, either directly in the murder or in covering it up afterward. If true, that would mean the case wasn't just unsolved, it was potentially protected from being solved. Over the years, multiple theories have emerged. One of the most widely discussed comes from former detective Greg Kading, who concluded that Wardell Poochie Faust, a mob Piru gang member, was the shooter, allegedly hired by Suge Knight as retaliation. Another theory, supported by former FBI agent Phil Carson, points toward Amir Muhammad, allegedly connected to corrupt LAPD officer David Mack, suggesting a deeper level of institutional involvement. But without clear surveillance footage placing any suspect at the scene, every theory remains circumstantial. And that's what makes this case so frustrating. Because in the end, Biggie wasn't killed in the shadows. He was killed in public, in a major city, surrounded by people. And yet somehow, the truth slipped away. Lost between missing footage, conflicting stories, and a system that may never have fully pursued it. What makes this case even more disturbing is that the deeper investigators looked, the more it began to resemble not just a failed investigation, but one that may have been actively obstructed. Both Phil Carson and Russell Poole claimed that evidence pointing toward corrupt officers was deliberately suppressed. Carson stated that his investigation uncovered nearly 3,000 pages of material suggesting possible LAPD involvement in the murder. But instead of being allowed to pursue those leads, he says he was instructed by superiors to step back. If true, that would represent something far deeper than simple incompetence. It would suggest a systemic failure, one where the truth itself was being contained. That possibility gained serious credibility in 2005, when Biggie's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles. During the proceedings, a judge declared a mistrial after discovering that an LAPD detective had intentionally concealed evidence relevant to the case, including documents that could have implicated officers. That ruling changed the conversation. It gave real weight to long-standing allegations of a cover-up. Beyond these core theories, other possibilities have surfaced over the years. Some have suggested that Biggie's murder may have been tied to larger criminal enterprises, even raising speculation about organized crime connections or financial motives within the music industry itself. The idea that powerful interests could have benefited from Biggie's death has never fully disappeared. But one of the most suspicious details remains the delay in the investigation itself. For nearly a month, the LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division, the unit typically responsible for high-profile murders, was not immediately assigned to the case. For a killing of this magnitude, that delay is highly unusual. In the earliest hours of any investigation, evidence is most fragile and leads are most valuable. Losing that time may have cost investigators their best chance at solving the case. Then there was the issue of witness intimidation. Multiple individuals who may have had information refused to cooperate, including inmates who were reportedly too afraid to testify. According to investigators, the fear was real, not just of gang retaliation, but potentially of corrupt officers as well. In that kind of environment, silence becomes survival. And the pattern becomes even more troubling when you look at what happened to those who pursued the corruption angle. Russell Poole claimed he was forced out of the LAPD in 1999 after his findings were suppressed. But he never stopped investigating. For years, he continued independently, maintaining until his death in 2015 that corrupt officers were involved in both the murder and the cover-up. Phil Carson reported a similar experience. His investigation, too, was allegedly shut down as it moved closer to sensitive connections. When multiple investigators from different agencies describe being blocked in similar ways, it raises a serious question. Was this coincidence or something more deliberate? Because the truth is, Biggie's killers didn't just benefit from the darkness of that night. They benefited from a perfect storm. The shooting itself was fast, precise, and controlled. The gunman pulled up, fired, and disappeared within seconds. The chaotic scene outside the museum, hundreds of people, traffic congestion, confusion, created the ideal conditions for escape. There were also reports of a white Toyota Land Cruiser making a U-turn and positioning itself behind Biggie's SUV moments before the shooting. Its exact role remains unclear, but it may have acted as a lookout or distraction, further suggesting coordination. No one was in a position to give chase. Biggie's crew was focused on saving his life. Sean Combs had already moved ahead in a separate vehicle. By the time anyone could react, the Impala was gone. Witnesses were left with fragments: a suit, a bow tie, a dark car. No plates, no clear identification. The ammunition used, rare 9mm armor-piercing rounds, pointed to preparation, but left little traceable evidence. Even the shooter's appearance may have been strategic, either to blend into the upscale crowd or to create a misleading image that would stick in memory but lead nowhere. And then, in the years that followed, key individuals connected to the case began to disappear. Wardell "Poochie" Faust, identified in one theory as the shooter, was killed in 2003. Orlando Anderson, linked to the events surrounding Tupac Shakur, was killed in 1998. Whether or not they held definitive answers, their deaths removed potential pathways to the truth. Others simply stayed silent. Carson reported that some inmates he spoke to were so afraid of David Mack that they chose to remain in prison rather than cooperate. That level of fear speaks volumes. It suggests an environment where telling the truth carried consequences far worse than staying quiet. Put simply, Biggie's killers escaped not just because of what happened that night, but because of everything that happened after. Planning, timing, chaos, missing evidence, intimidation, and possibly obstruction from within. And that raises the question, what if this had happened today? In today's world, the same crime would likely unfold very differently. A major intersection like Wilshire and Fairfax would be covered by multiple high-definition cameras. The Peterson Automotive Museum would have full surveillance inside and out. Nearby businesses would contribute additional footage. Bystanders would record on smartphones. Instead of blurry fragments, investigators would likely have clear images: faces, license plates, movement patterns. Modern tools like facial recognition, license plate tracking, and digital forensics could reconstruct the entire timeline. A suspect vehicle could be tracked across the city. Cell phone data could place individuals at the scene. Even low-quality footage could be enhanced using advanced software. Escaping unnoticed today would be far more difficult. But the Biggie case reveals something deeper. Technology alone does not solve crimes, because even the most advanced surveillance systems depend on the people operating them. If those responsible for collecting, analyzing, or preserving evidence are compromised, then even the clearest footage can disappear. And that is the real lesson here. The failure in Biggie's case was not just technical, it was systemic. Evidence may not have been properly secured, leads may not have been fully pursued, oversight may have been lacking when it mattered most. And as time passes, the chances of resolution continue to fade. Evidence degrades, witnesses disappear, memories fade, key figures are gone. The case has been reopened multiple times, in 2006, again in 2011, and each time, hope resurfaced. But no charges followed. Even the 2023 arrest of Dwayne Keefe D. Davis in connection to Tupac's murder raised expectations that new information might emerge. So far, it hasn't. Today, Biggie's murder remains officially unsolved. Some investigators believe the case is solved but unprosecuted. Others believe the full truth may never come out. But one thing is clear. This wasn't just a murder lost in the shadows. It was a case that may have been lost in the system itself. And that's what makes it unforgettable. Nearly 3 decades after gunshots echoed through that Los Angeles intersection, the question of who killed the Notorious B.I.G. still remains unanswered. For his family, for his fans, and even for the investigators who spent years chasing the truth, there has never been real closure. That absence of justice is more than just a gap in a case file. It represents a deeper failure, a system that couldn't, or perhaps wouldn't, deliver answers. A failure shaped by missing surveillance, possible corruption, and a climate of fear strong enough to silence witnesses and protect those responsible. Because in the end, Biggie wasn't taken in the shadows. He was taken in public, in a major city, surrounded by people. And still, the truth slipped away. The killers disappeared into the night, leaving behind not just a crime scene, but one of the most enduring mysteries in music history. A case that continues to live on through questions, theories, and the feeling that something important was never fully revealed. But Biggie's legacy didn't disappear with him. His voice still echoes, his impact still shapes the culture, and his story, unfinished as it is, remains one of the most powerful reminders of how high the stakes once were in hip-hop. This wasn't just a loss, it was a turning point. And maybe that's why people are still searching for answers all these years later. Because some stories don't fade, they wait. Thanks for watching Hood Secrets. If you want more deep dives like this, real stories, real history, and the truths the industry doesn't always talk about, make sure to check out the videos on your screen right now.